In November 1917, General John J. Pershing faced a quiet disaster in France. The American expeditionary forces were pouring into Europe, but the Army's nerve center was practically paralyzed. American commanders couldn't talk to their own frontline units, and they certainly couldn't coordinate with their French allies. Modern warfare in 1917 ran on copper wire. Radio was still primitive and easily intercepted, while runner infantry and carrier pigeons were far too slow for fast-moving artillery barrages. If a division commander wanted to order a barrage or request reinforcements, he had to pick up a telephone. But the phone network stretching across the Western Front was an absolute mess. American lines had to patch directly into damaged French civilian exchanges and British military networks. When an American officer in Chaumont tried to call a French railway station to move an ammunition train, he encountered a wall of static and language barriers. The French civilian operators spoke no English and had no idea how American military grid coordinates worked. Pershing didn't just need more telephone wire. He needed a completely different kind of operator to run the switchboards. At first, the US Army tried to solve the problem using male soldiers drawn from Signal Corps units. On paper, it made sense. Keep the Army all male and train soldiers to plug cords into jacks. In practice, the system clogged almost immediately. In the 1910s, commercial telephone operating in the United States was almost exclusively a female trade. Companies like AT&T hired tens of thousands of women because the work required incredible manual dexterity, rapid pattern recognition, and calm customer handling under intense pressure. The male doughboys assigned to military switchboards had none of this experience. They fumbled with the heavy brass plugs, misrouted calls, and frequently lost their tempers with frustrated officers. An average connection handled by male soldiers took up to 60 seconds. On a quiet day, a minute-long delay was annoying. In the middle of an incoming bombardment, a 1-minute delay meant counter-battery orders arrived too late, leaving frontline positions exposed while the line sat dead. To make matters worse, almost none of the male operators spoke fluent French. When an American call hit a French junction, the conversation ground to a complete halt as officers hunted around for someone to translate word for word. On November 8, 1917, Pershing sent an urgent, confidential cable to the War Department in Washington. He didn't ask for more guns or more horses. He requested a specialized unit of female telephone operators who were fluent in both English and French. The request caused immediate panic in Washington. Unlike the Navy, which was already enlisting female clerks back home as yeomanettes, Army regulations strictly limited women to the Army Nurse Corps. But Pershing's demand was clear. Without expert operators, American operations in France would stall. The War Department put out a national call. Over 7,000 American women applied for the first slots. The selection process was brutal. Candidates had to pass rigorous French language fluency exams, Secret Service background checks, and physical endurance tests. Out of thousands of applicants, only 450 were accepted for training, and eventually 223 were sent overseas. These women were organized into the Signal Corps Female Telephone Operators Unit. They were issued dark blue wool Army uniforms, official Signal Corps insignia, and assigned military ranks ranging from operator to chief operator. They took the standard Army oath, were subjected to court-martial discipline, and paid for their own uniform tailoring. In March 1918, the first group of 33 operators arrived in France under the command of 25-year-old Chief Operator Grace Banker. They were immediately deployed to major switchboard hubs in Paris, Chaumont, London, and Southampton. The switchboard rooms they took over were physical pressure cookers. An American military switchboard was a massive wooden frame lined with hundreds of tiny brass jacks, glowing signal lamps, and heavy rubber cords. An operator sat on a high wooden stool wearing a leather headset that weighed several pounds. When a light flickered, she snatched a cord, plugged it into the jack, answered the line, and identified the caller. If an American general needed to speak with a French Corps commander, the operator didn't just route the call. She acted as a real-time translator. She held both lines open, listening to the English command in one ear, and translating it instantly into French for the operator on the other end. The results were immediate and startling. The women reduced the average connection time from 60 seconds down to just 10 seconds, operating 6 times faster than the male soldiers they replaced. Over the course of the war, these 223 women connected over 26 million calls for the American Expeditionary Forces. They handled troop movements, supply trains, casualty reports, and frontline artillery coordination. While most operators worked at large headquarters exchanges behind the lines, the Army quickly realized that their speed was needed much closer to the front. In late August 1918, Chief Operator Grace Banker and a selected team of 6 operators were assigned to 1st Army Headquarters at Souilly, just 15 miles behind the front line for the St. Mihiel and Meuse-Argonne offensives. Operating in wooden barracks within range of German heavy artillery, the women worked 20-hour shifts while night bombers flew overhead and artillery fire rattled the switchboard frames. They slept in unheated quarters, wore gas masks at their posts when alarm sirens sounded, and kept the lines open through the largest American offensive of the war. During one engagement at Souilly, a fire broke out in the headquarters barracks. As smoke filled the switchboard room, officers ordered the operators to evacuate. Grace Banker and her team refused to leave their stools, continuing to route artillery and casualty calls until guards physically forced them out the door. Once the fire was controlled, they walked back inside and resumed connecting calls within minutes. For her leadership under fire during the Meuse-Argonne offensive, Grace Banker was awarded the Distinguished Service Medal, the Army's highest non-combat decoration. Out of thousands of Signal Corps personnel, she was one of the very few individuals personally decorated by General Pershing. When the armistice was signed in November 1918, the operators remained in France for months to manage communications for the Paris Peace Conference and the occupation forces in Germany. As the unit was gradually demobilized in 1910, the women prepared to return home, expecting standard military honorable discharge certificates, victory medals, and civilian re-employment support. Instead, they walked straight into a bureaucratic wall. When operator Merle Egan Anderson applied for her formal discharge papers in 1919, the War Department denied her request. Army lawyers ruled that despite their military oaths, Army uniforms, military discipline, and official ranks, the women had technically served as civilian contract employees. Because Army regulations at the time specified that soldiers must be male, the War Department decided that the Hello Girls had never officially been in the Army at all. They were denied discharge papers, denied victory medals, denied bonus pay, and barred from accessing military health care or hospitalization for injuries suffered overseas. The women didn't accept the ruling quietly. Led by Merle Egan Anderson, surviving operators spent the next 60 years petitioning Congress and the War Department for official recognition. Between 1927 and 1977, over 50 separate bills were introduced in Congress to grant the Hello Girls veteran status. For decades, the Army successfully lobbied against the legislation, maintaining its rigid bureaucratic position that civilian contract personnel could not retroactively be granted military status. It wasn't until November 1977, 60 years after General Pershing sent his emergency cable, that Congress finally passed legislation recognizing the Signal Corps Female Telephone Operators Unit as full military veterans. President Jimmy Carter signed the bill into law. By the time the honorable discharge certificates and victory medals were finally issued in 1979, only 18 of the original 223 operators were still alive to receive them. The story of the Hello Girls isn't a curiosity about telephone history. It's a demonstration of how modern military logistics actually worked. The U.S. Army didn't deploy bilingual switchboard operators because it wanted to make history. It deployed them because without their speed, dexterity, and language skills, the American military command network on the Western Front couldn't function. They mastered the grid under fire, even if the military took 60 years to admit they were there.